Welcome back to Coffee and UFOs, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I have a special guest, Vinnie Adams. He is the host of Disclosure Team. You can find him on YouTube at Real Disclosure Team and all his videos at Real Disclosure Team /videos. He does amazing interviews with some of the best sources in contemporary UAP um, studies and activism and ongoing news. So if you want to keep up with it, this is the guy that you want to follow for sure. I'm really excited to find out a little bit more about Vinny, his background, how he got into UAP. But before we discuss more with Vinny, just a friendly reminder that this podcast is rebroadcast on the UnX network every Thursday night, 11 p.m. Pacific time, 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday mornings. If you want to follow the podcast, you can go to Instagram. It's at Coffee and UFOs podcast. And on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can go to at paranormal_now. And on Blue Sky, it's Coffee and UFOs podcast as well. And of course, the old Facebook page is still there under Mystic Lounge, which I still post on occasion. Yeah, it's been a little on and off with me with the podcasting because like I mentioned before, I have a writing project that I'm kind of focused on. So we've got this week. Next week we have another episode, and then we may take off one more week. I'm not sure. I'll let you know in social media whether we get that week filled. Man, I've never written a book before, and it's like it is not easy. It is a challenge. Especially with the ongoing news that's happening, I have to keep going back and like re-editing a chapter because I'm like, oh my God, there's new information. But that's okay. That's cool because it's kind of fun taking the challenge on of countering the debunker. So we'll talk a little bit of that too with Vinny right now. Welcome to Coffee and UFOs. Cheers. How are you?
I'm good, Alan. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Me too, man. I'm so glad you came on. Thank you so much. Are you a coffee drinker?
I am very much big coffee drinker. I mean, I
Yeah.
say big, it doesn't mean I drink a lot of it, but yeah,
Mm.
I have to start my day with a good coffee.
Yeah. I mean, that's my first thought when I roll out of bed is the cup of coffee downstairs. And then I can start thinking about everything else.
Yep.
But it's 2 a.m. there, so I'm sure you're not drinking coffee right now.
No, I did think about it just, with the theme of the show and everything, but I thought that's just not a good idea.
A bridge too far. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's find out about you. I've been listening to your podcast and watching your videos for a while, but how did you even get started or interested in the UAP space in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It goes right back to my childhood. I was born in the late 70s, so early 80s, so many great sci-fi movies instantly sparked that
Yeah.
curiosity about aliens with movies like E.T. and Close Encounters and
Mhm.
space with Star Wars and things like that. And so, I was already kind of tuned into that big thinking. But then I suppose it came more in my 20s. I started discovering a lot of fringe subjects and books and things like that. And so I went down this windy road of dabbling with different subjects from ancient Egypt to philosophy and things like that. And I eventually landed on UFOs. And my first port of call really was researching declassified documents.
Mhm.
I'll probably go back about 15 years now. So I would have been in my 30s by the time I took it super seriously. And so it would be late nights, like later than it is right now, just in front of my computer, looking at documents, just digging as deep as I could, jumping down so many rabbit holes.
Mm.
And it kind of just escalated from there, really. COVID hit, and that kind of is when I kind of really dove in and started to do things publicly. And then it hasn't really
Yeah.
stopped ever since.
It's interesting. There are a lot of new minds on this subject during and after COVID. I don't know if it's because we had spare time, but people did. They really got into it because the
Yeah.
timing couldn't have been better. I mean, by the time the New York Times article in 2017 came out, leading up to 2020, I mean, there was like kind of a 3-year crescendo because it just kept getting more and more interesting. It wasn't just an article. There was actual activity. You had the formation of the task force, UAP task force. You had the Navy creating new rules and regulations for submitting reports of UAP. And so I think a lot of people came to the subject and like, oh, this is really a real thing. Uh, when you were growing up, how would you compare your experience with talking about this subject? I don't know, 20 years ago versus today.
Yeah, 20 years ago, I just really had no knowledge. It was all extraterrestrial and space aliens to me. It was only when I started researching seriously, I'm going to say around 2009 or 2010 kind of era,
Mm-hmm.
that I realized that it's so much more than that. And the one thing I will say is, leading up from sort of 2010 through to the 2017 New York Times article,
Mm-hmm.
the subject was very stale. And that's not to discredit anyone that was doing good work in it.
Sure, sure.
It didn't feel like there was any kind of progression at all. It was a little bit repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see these two sides of my time being in the subject. There's
Yeah,
that pre
yeah,
2017 and post 2017, where we've, seen things ramp up and escalate so much in the past sort of 7, 8 years. It's been
oh, for sure.
great.
Yeah, no, it has been great. I think that everyone, even now, we have these moments where it feels like it plateaus, but that doesn't last very long.
No,
It really doesn't, because like recently you had Christopher Brown, come out. Matthew
Matthew
Brown, I'm
Brown.
sorry, Matthew Brown come out. And I know you watched all 3 of those episodes. I've only gotten through 2 in a little bit. What's your take on Matthew Brown? Do you think he's a sincere, legit whistleblower?
I do, yeah. From what I've seen, my initial instincts are that he saw what he says he saw.
Hmm.
He was in the position to see that information. I know George and Jeremy always do a great job of they don't just dump information out there on a whim. They sit back and they take their time. They vet
Sure.
people. They vet information. They've got great sources, and so I tip my hat to them for biding their time, and
Mhm.
obviously they felt like the time was right, and Matthew himself would have felt like now is the time where I want to put my name and my face out there, because it can't be easy
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
come out publicly after working in the positions he did, and saying the things that he's saying. So yeah, really, really credible individual, and I hope that by him coming forward, it gives fuel to the people that can actually use this information and
Mhm.
action it. I hope we get some progress with that.
Yeah, I might be reading between the lines a little bit, but Matthew seemed to really allude a dependent relationship with David Grush as far as feeling comfortable with coming out and being a whistleblower. And there's this critique that we see, especially by the likes of Stephen Greenstreet, of where's David Grush's article that he promised? Why hasn't he come to a skiff and shared with Congress? I, I I think it sounds to me, and again, I might be reading between the lines. It seems to me David Grush is waiting for more uh, backup. It seems to
I
me
mean,
he doesn't want to just keep going out on his own. And now that Matthew's out, and Matthew alluded that there were more that wanted to come out as well. I don't know. Maybe there's safety in numbers.
that surely is a big part of it. I mean, Grush did actually finally get into a skiff 2 days ago with Arrow. So
Yeah.
what we wanted to happen for
Hmm.
the last couple of years has finally happened. It's the ball's rolling
Right. Right.
in that direction as far as Grush. But you say there that we have to read between the lines. We do, unfortunately. There are so many gaps in what we know as the general public to what
Hmm.
happens behind the scenes when it comes to this subject, because we're dealing with such highly classified information that
Yeah.
unfortunately we're just not able to see the full picture. And so it's very easy for certain people in certain areas. The debunkers will fill in their gaps with debunking, and the
Right.
believers
Right.
with other things, and everything else in between. And so it is
Hmm.
a really difficult subject when you're trying to put together a full puzzle and you just haven't got all the pieces. There are going to be
Sure.
some real gaps, but strength in numbers, absolutely. David Grush always said that he'd spoken to 40 plus whistleblowers, and now
Hmm.
we have been hearing about they're ready to come forward and things like that. But if I was a whistleblower, you think, looking at the way that David Grush has been received in the last couple of years hasn't been, that enticing, let's say, for some people to want to speak.
Sure.
It's got to be
Sure.
nerve-wracking. So I try and put myself in their shoes, and
Hmm.
it is going to be a slow process, unfortunately, as far as public information goes. But we got to do it right. There's only going to be really one real chance to get this done without
Hmm.
pushing it back many years, in my opinion.
Yeah, and having to do it right. You just kind of rung a bell when you said that. Uh, you've spoken to Lou Elizondo. You know Lou. What's your take on the images that he's put out that people have critiqued him for? Like one was like the chandelier image, which I'll just pop up because I have that. So like there's this chandelier image, which like as a MUFON and field investigator, that's the kind of basic thing that like you're able to call out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things you think like, oh, did somebody take this picture from inside a building? Is it refraction from a light, post outside? That kind of thing. And then there was the second one recently, which he didn't actually claim was a real UFO. He was just displaying it as an example of what someone took a picture of. A pilot took a picture of some, what was it, 1970 something, I think. I can't remember what year it was. Uh,
I'm not sure what year it was. No.
yeah, and saying, oh, this is interesting. This is the kind of stuff that we look into. But the fact that he even put it out there without, I don't know. I guess I think that you would think that Lou would know, especially as a counterintelligence, um, you know, uh, um, officer, that he would know how people process information. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the timing definitely wasn't right for that last photo. In the setting that
Mhm.
it was a really important event with so many great panel members giving such great information in that setting on Capitol Hill. And so I think Lou should have known what the community's reaction would have been like, even with the caveats that he gave. He should have known that it would have maybe overshadowed some of the other information. So that I think there was a genuine mistake there on his part.
Mhm.
There's no real reason to, he could have highlighted the point that he was making without showing the photograph. I think it was a spur of the moment thing that I think in hindsight I think he probably does regret.
Yeah. And I do have to kind of wonder if I know they say once you're in intelligence community, you're always in the intelligence community. Like my father, says like once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine kind of a thing. So but he is in a different world now. He is operating in a different way, especially if you read his, book Imminent.
Hmm.
You really get this sense of transition from, government worker to my life's been kind of turned upside down, and now I have to embrace this new lifestyle. This new lifestyle that people critique Lou of living, which I think is kind of absurd. But so I think that maybe is it possible that he's just kind of letting his guard down and just because this is kind of how he's making a living now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I do know Lou, but I don't know the
Hmm.
reasons why he makes certain decisions. I
Hmm.
just don't. I think I look at the big picture. He brought a lot of people to this subject. He brought Congress to this subject. He's done some great work. He's not, he's human like the rest of us.
Sure. Yeah.
Could he be trying? Could he be counterintelligence still to some degree? Absolutely, because we don't genuinely know everything about everybody in that.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult. It's really hard to say. That photograph, that last one, I think it did muddy the waters slightly. It did take the the event in a slightly different direction. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Oh, that's what we said last time. So hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully we don't have a third time. The Chuddy in chat said, I would suspect that Elizondo made a much better living working for the feds than writing books about UFOs. I think there's a lot to be said about that. There's nothing
Yeah.
like a steady paycheck.
Exactly.
Um,
We
yeah.
knew his position. There's a certain pay grade for that kind of position and a very,
Hmm.
lucrative pension and everything like that, which he, gave up, um, you know,
Yeah.
for the reasons that he gave. So, you got to give it to him for that.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a UFO before?
No, I haven't. Not a genuine UFO. I've seen strange lights, which definitely can't be. We couldn't figure out what they were, but
Okay.
not not an object, not a metallic sphere or a disc or anything like that. I would
Sure.
absolutely love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, that was my experience too when I was about 12 years old. It's all lights behaving in ways that shouldn't be behaving in 1991 or 92.
Right.
Especially that, and that's what I love about. It's funny you were talking about the UFO study being kind of stale, and that's true. So, but now we're at this kind of inflection point of the old the older it is, the better it is, and the newer the technology is, the better it is, and everything else in between is really questionable. So it's like it's funny. It was just I just picked up this old book. This is by
Oh
I'm sure
wow.
you're familiar with Philip Klass.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, world class debunker. Um, but I wanted to read this and get and just see things from his perspective, because when you look at all these old cases, there's always something new to discover. I
There
think,
is.
at
Yeah.
least on a
No,
personal level.
very much so. The good thing that also I found with the post 2017 and the ramping
Hmm.
up of the subject, that it's breathed a new life into old cases as well, because there are certain cases now with all this hype around the subject and the
Hmm.
legitimacy of it a bit more in the public eye, is that
Yeah.
you can compare new cases and go back into the historical record and see old cases in a whole new light, because you can
Mhm.
actually almost cross-reference certain cases and go, well, that old case makes more sense because it relates almost to something that we're seeing in the modern times. And that, and through these down periods that we do still get every now and again, is the
Mhm.
perfect time for me personally to go back and just brush up on some of them old cases that I
Yeah.
used to research when I first started, many years ago. And so it's like this revolving kind of circle of just keeping that knowledge fresh and not forgetting about the old stuff, because it is so important to the overall study.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the new stuff, I think you have an episode with Avi Loeb
I do.
coming up soon, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so what should we expect? What's in that conversation?
Obviously, Avi, he said it's kind of the first interview he's done in the UFO community since he was a panel member at the May 1st event.
Mm,
He's talking about, how he would, want $1 billion for a really serious UAP study that's not on the same vein as the Galileo project, but more focused on the UAP themselves. And
yeah.
so we touch upon that a bit. Um, Avi's just always really great to listen to. I always have to really mentally prepare myself for speaking with him, because he
Yeah.
speaks in such depth about, astrophysics and astronomy and things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really interesting interview. People, I think, are going to like it. Avi's just a really a great guest, so that's going to come out tomorrow.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. And he also has a good sense of humor too.
He does. He
And it's
does.
in his
Yeah.
books too. It's like it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to communicate this subject. Because people either think it's, weird paranormal, or, it has to be hard science, but you can be
Yeah.
kind of somewhere in between and have fun with it a little bit.
Definitely.
Um,
I did that in one question. I asked him, about
yeah,
his presentation at the panel, and he gave that very scientific answer. And then I followed it up by asking him, well, Eric Davis was sat almost next to you, and he's a reputable scientist, but he was saying some very out there things about, this subject. And
yeah,
what, so I asked Avi what his thoughts were, and he doesn't hold back. He's like, stories are good, but it's not enough for me. I need that hard evidence and the data. So,
sure.
it was great to kind of, I almost knew that's how he was going to answer it, but I,
Yeah.
I wanted to put it to him anyway. So yeah, it's great. He has that real good skeptic side of him, but he's so
Mhm.
very open to this subject, and we need so many more people like that.
We do. We have more now that are public and prominent.
Yes,
But the truth is, I mean, especially in like the 60s, you did have some prominent scientists. Even Carl Sagan in the early years,
in the
was
early
was
years.
was quite interested in the UFO subject. CIA had Kit Green, and then there was this like gap of decades, and now we finally have some big names like Dr. Gary Nolan and Avi Loeb, Dr. Kevin Knuth. I've interviewed. I
Mm.
love. I know I just geek out about this like probably every episode. But did you ever see the video at the Soul Conference that Kevin Knuth presented?
Maybe I've seen
Okay,
so much of
so
Kevin's work. I can't
y-
remember which one he showed
yeah,
at that particular event.
so what he presented was research based on another researcher from years ago, but kind of updated it, and
Okay.
he was explaining scientifically how that spooky thing we see in the movies where a UFO comes near a car, and the car goes out, and then magically goes back on,
Right.
and forever, oh, that's so ridiculous, that's absurd, that's just paranormal magic, whatever. Well, he actually presented exactly how an electrical, an ionizing, like electromagnetic energy can actually affect the starter of a car, the older
Right.
cars particularly.
Yeah.
And I just love that stuff, because it's like you said, it's if you're patient enough, if you wait long enough, like David Grush is going to come out, he's going to go into a skiff, and it doesn't do us any good, I don't think, to have people naysaying in between and constantly, and for some I would say whining. I
Yeah.
right? Is that a good descriptive? What about you? So things get a little bit more difficult to accept, I think, when it becomes anecdotal. So do you think that the Immaculate Constellation program, even with Matthew Brown's 11-page paper submitted, is that enough? Like, is there enough that's tangible there that you accept it as a possible real UAP recovery program?
I think there's enough there for people with the power to act on it. There's
Hmm.
something for them to work with. So if it turns out that it's an avenue they go down and leads to a dead end, so be it.
Hmm.
We regularly hear from people who have seen UAP videos on networks such as the SIPRNet or JWICS within the Department of Defense. So there's
Hmm.
that avenue directly within the DoD already. These other things that get added on, like Immaculate Constellation, are just more things to
Yeah.
help and to finally get that information to the members of Congress. It is really important, and as this process keeps going, it seems that a lot of naysayers, let's say, have already made their
Hmm.
mind up about these things, and we're not even
Oh yeah.
maybe not even close to the finish line yet. I'd
Hmm.
like to think maybe we're getting there.
Hmm.
So for me personally, I certainly won't make up my mind on anything at this point, other than
Yeah.
there is something that is worthy of this investigation. This subject is worthy of being taken seriously, and I think it's healthy to be open-minded about it, potentially being NHI and not just top secret military technology. So, if I can't speak on behalf of the debunkers, I don't know what drives them to
Hmm.
some of them to be the way they are,
Yeah.
but it certainly doesn't detract from my thinking or my work, my direction, let's say.
Yeah. I think for me, my concern is not you or I, but the people that get turned on to it and then get turned off very quickly because of the debunkers. So I feel like we lose minds that should be on the subject and could participate, because they get turned off, by what the debunkers are saying. And a good debunker is really effective at and making you feel stupid for believing something. And like I call out Green Street by name. I don't mind anymore. Like, you know, he does that. He kind of writes things, presents things in a way that's kind of like shaming you
Yeah.
for even thinking about this as a possibility. And so that's why I try to work against the debunker to some degree, or I'm trying to not because I'm like, oh, I hate the debunker. It's because these other people that we're losing that I think deserve to be involved and learn about this too.
Yeah, I mean that it does detract, certainly. The thing is, I tend to ignore that hardcore debunker. I think I don't have the energy or the time even to
Hmm.
kind of interact or even go against them. I know that
Yeah.
there's a close fine line between being a skeptic and a debunker. I'm
Sure.
friends with some very big skeptics,
Hmm.
but the way they deliver their side of the argument, let's say, and it's not even an argument,
Yeah.
their thoughts and their opinions is healthy, and it's done in a healthy way. And I've had many conversations with people like that, and at the end of the day, we'll still be friendly with each other, and I think
Sure.
that's healthy. But when it comes to it crosses over into that extreme debunking, and like you said, make people feel like they're doing something wrong almost.
Hmm.
I just don't have time for it, and as much as I could sit there and call them out on it and stand up to it, they
Hmm.
won't change. I don't think. They're not
No.
going to listen
No.
to me. They've already made their minds up. That's who they want to be. That's
Sure.
how they want to be perceived. They obviously get something from it. I said, just let them do it. They'll get bored eventually.
I thought Green Sea was going to get bored. He posted like I don't know a couple weeks ago that he's done with it, and then he just kept going.
Yeah,
I'm like, you're not
yeah,
done. Yeah,
yeah. That's the thing. I just ignore it. If I don't see
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it's not going to affect me because it does frustrate me to see it, and it frustrates
yeah,
me to
yeah.
see people, especially if people are directly getting bullied, which does happen,
That's what I don't.
unfortunately.
Yeah, that ticks me
No, I
off.
mean that's
Yeah,
just not on. But we're all grown ups here. I think at the end
yeah.
of the day, we can handle ourselves.
Um, there is a certain irony about it because they they seem to just keep going at it, right? And but the critique of the UFO enthusiast or investigator or researcher or podcaster is that you guys are obsessed and you can't stop. Well, neither can you. You
Yeah,
keep going too, and I do kind of wonder if there's like a just a subconscious attraction to the subject, even if you are highly skeptical of it.
I just don't know. I mean, they must be quite miserable to act that way day in and day out, and that's what
Mm,
I can't wrap my head around. And I just think, look, I wish them all the best in if they've got something going on that makes them that way. I don't know,
mhm.
but yeah, it
What do you
baffles me.
What do you know about the S4 movie that's supposed to come out with about Bob Lazar? Apparently, this is supposed to be kind of groundbreaking and really, really insightful.
Yeah, so it really focuses on that specific time, that quite short amount of time that Bob Lazar allegedly worked at S4 on the craft, let's say.
Hmm.
And so, I spoke with Luigi Venditelli, the director and executive producer, great guy. I think he's
Hmm.
put a lot of hard work, his heart and soul into this project. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this differs from any previous work on Bob Lazar, notably Jeremy Corbell's documentary.
Hmm.
But they've also kind of brought in this modern technology to create this virtual reality model, let's say, of S4, which by the sounds of it is going to be very in depth. And you'll be able to take this virtual tour around the facility that even Bob himself is saying, they've nailed it. They've got it almost to the point where he feels like he's back there again.
Yeah.
And I think then there'll be a companion book as well to come out with it. So I think it's great telling a story again that we kind of think we may know, but with
Hmm.
new technology and some of the people that they've interviewed for it, old friends of Bob's that we may not have heard from before in recent times, may just add a little bit of something to the story. Whether it sways anyone, and I'm kind of on the fence still with this whole story, we'll
Sure.
see. But again, I'm open minded to it because it can't be proved 100% one way or the other. So I have to keep it on the proverbial table.
Of course. Yeah. Well, to find that video of Luigi Venditelli and other interviews, go to. I'm going to post it right here. It's at Disclosure Team on YouTube. Let me just drop that in the comments, guys, and it's also in the show description as well. Then, of course, you can just follow on X at Disclosure Team X and on Instagram, Disclosure underscore Team. Okay, I have to ask you this question because I see it, discussed online, and there I think there is something to it. You know, is there something about News Nation and covering the UFO UAP topic in the way that it does? Because it seems like you can compare it to any other station and no one covers it. I mean, it does huge numbers covering the UFO and UAP topic. Do you think that there is anything behind News Nation that motivates this for the purposes of disclosure, or do you think it's just a good business model?
Yeah, I tend to think, the majority of that would lean towards it being a good business model. They really understand the way that people consume news these days, that
Hmm.
it's online and it's not just these old networks that, may have ties to money from elsewhere, let's
Sure.
say.
Hmm.
I see it like that. I think it's just a really good way of, pushing the envelope when it comes to journalism and still trying to be like old school, but in a new way. It's not independent as other journalists we have in this community. I think it rides that balance in between and it does it really well, really well.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point because if you look at legacy media, the conspiracy there always was they're not covering it because the people behind the scenes are telling them not to cover it. And now you have News Nation who is covering it, and the conspiracy is the people
Yeah,
behind the scenes are making them cover it. It's like, well,
yeah.
which one is it, right?
You're
Yeah,
always going to get that, I think, with any kind of
yeah,
media outlet. But yeah, I just see it as just a sign of the times, really.
yeah. So, do you think there's any kind of crossover? Do you believe in anything related to paranormal or other, high strangeness activity with the
What,
UAP?
relating to UAP? Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, it's certainly possible. I think when I look at the UFO subject, and if NHI is real, which I believe there is some reality to it, obviously,
Hmm.
I think that if we were to find out the truth, it would be so far beyond what we may have even conceived so far as in some of the theories and hypotheses, that it really does paint a picture that the whole paranormal subject falls right in there with this subject as well. I think that would
Hmm.
just make the most sense, rather than it being completely separate entities, no pun intended. I think it does seem like there really could be some relation there, especially like when you look at ghosts and apparitions and
Mm.
things like that.
I think I fear, and I have a couple of friends in this community that very much so believe that something like gray aliens or whatever are demons, or because they're either religious or Catholic or something like that, and so that's kind of how they interpret it. I don't, obviously that way. Uh, do you think that there is a danger in that, or do you think that that's reasonable to consider?
I don't think there's a danger to that at all. I think people ascribe their own names to these things because they fit into a certain framework of how they maybe have been brought up, or things that
Mm,
they believe in when it comes to religion and that. And again, I think there is definitely some connection between religion and history, and the history of religion that
mm,
fits into this. So I think focusing too much on the labels, maybe just going a bit too far, maybe,
okay.
because they may just interpret certain things that someone else may call a gray alien a demon. I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it does too much damage necessarily.
Mm. So then what do we need to do next that we're not doing to, kind of bring in disclosure or just study the subject in general?
I still think public awareness is one of the most key
Mm,
things, and it's the same cliche: speak with your family, speak with your friends,
interesting. Yeah.
make it make it a normal everyday conversation. I mean, I look here around me in the UK, and we still have the tabloid newspapers are the ones that cover the subject, and it's still Little Green Men in the X Files. Whereas over in the US, it's kind of shifted away from that in recent years, and so over here, it's really about not allowing that stigma to be the kind of main source for everyday folk. It's about legitimizing it through just everyday conversation, and bringing awareness to what is happening these days. That there are congressional hearings in the US. It's being
Right.
taken
Right.
seriously by the government, and so I found that by having those conversations myself, that
Yeah.
people are very open to it. They just haven't wanted to talk about it through fear of ridicule. So
Mm,
I
mhm.
think people need to just don't be afraid to bring it up at at the dinner table, and you might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a good way to ease people into it. To just maybe not have a full blown conversation about Betty and Barney Hill on the first
Yeah.
conversation, but if you can say, "Oh, hey, did you hear that Congress is having a hearing?" Or a closed door hearing with a UFO whistleblower. Oh no, yeah. Oh, it's in the news. It's real. Okay, and then don't overdo it. Just but I
Yeah.
think it's a good way to like just say, hey, this is something that serious people are looking into. And I know there are a lot of stage. There's a lot of stagecraft in politics. And I know there are politicians who say don't know that the country Singapore exists. Um, sadly, but those who do get those positions, they they are serious people. They are, worldly, smart people. You don't get those positions in Congress, if you're not. And so I think that's also important to emphasize. Um, is Arrow not beholden to Congress?
I mean, they should be. They were mandated to do certain things by Congress, but
Mhm.
in past 10 years with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and I think the interim director Tim Phillips, it didn't seem like they were doing what they should have been doing. I think just this week with Arrow meeting with David Grush, it seems that David Grush kind of in the conversation gave so much more than Arrow's ever given. And
Mm.
so they really need to buck their ideas up. But I think John Kozlowski so far has given us a hint that maybe he's different to what we've seen previously. I
Hmm.
mean, I still look back to the UAP task force and the progress that we got through them. I thought that was a great agency and they were doing great work. And we need to get
Yeah.
back to that, you know. But again, it's people like Senator Gillibrand who need to really buckle down and make sure that Arrow are doing this. And we don't hear from her so much anymore. I was always really hopeful that we'd see more things come from the Senate as
Yeah.
well. Maybe more hearings through the Senate with the Armed Services Committee and the Intel Committee. But we haven't,
Yeah.
unfortunately. It's now sort of almost fallen on the House and the Oversight Committee there to kind of be pushing this subject forward. So I'll take anything really. You know, it's all a win at the end of the day that they're taking
Sure.
this seriously at all. And even this week, you know, we've had many different things happen. We had the skiff meeting with Arrow and Grush. We had Dr. Eric Davis finally getting a skiff with Burleson, and then today I think the UAP caucus members met with the FBI for a briefing
Oh,
where they
really?
saw a new UFO video from the FBI that even Arrow hasn't seen. And so, you
Interesting.
know, it's
Wow.
3 major things happening in 1 week. So as much as we don't hear much about this publicly, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
certainly encouraging to hear about it and to know that the work's being done to set up for when we do get the next necessarily like public hearing or something like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people need to understand that the work is being done.
Yes, and even though I mean Gillibrand, that's my state. I'm, really appreciate the work that she's done, and Schumer, Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
Last year we went outside of his office in the city. I just stood there, held a sign, but it was just nice to show your presence and show your support
Yeah.
for the cause. I really appreciate it, but it is politics, and these are careers, and the politics in the U.S. right now are kind of just off the charts. So I think if ever there's a time for them to kind of like take a break from it and focus on what's going on in government, then that makes sense. That's why we're having kind of a down period. Also, you know, AOC is most likely going to challenge Schumer. So I'm sure the Democrats are like shuffling behind the scenes, figuring out like, oh my God, what are we going to do? There's going to be all this realignment of power. And so that's going to be really fascinating to see where that goes. Because you remember that first hearing with Grush,
Yeah.
AOC was hardcore, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. And I think like, even if she doesn't believe in it, like that's the way to go. Like following that money trail, I think is really it's like the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
You don't have
Oh,
to
it should
think
be.
about it should be, but you don't have to think about fantastical ideas or super secret this and that. Just follow the money and it should take you there, hopefully.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right. That's not always the easiest. Yeah. You're gonna say
No, and I
something?
think that
Oh,
it comes down to as well because people contacting their representatives. We've been saying it for years, and we still got so many more members of Congress to get on board with this subject.
mhm.
We got to be realistic as well. We live in the real world. Things are happening
Yes.
in this world every
Mhm.
single day, and Congress's focus is elsewhere most of the time. And you see people say, "But this is the biggest story of all time." Well, yeah, it is, but we've got to make them aware of it first for them to start taking
Sure.
it seriously. And
Yeah.
again, it's yet another process that we need to kind of get into gear. So I think if people are fed up with it, then it's unfortunate that they feel like that, but it is going to take time, and it's going to take people just
Yes.
keep stepping up to the plate. We need that to happen. We've come so close to having more languages implemented through the NDAA. We got so close and it's been rejected, but it doesn't mean we need to stop there. We need to keep doing it because
Hmm.
we can get there. I do believe we just need that just keep pushing.
Yeah. Obviously, we've made some major inroads and progress forward, and yeah, so the whistleblower protection isn't ideal, but I guess technically it's better than where it was. Now, according to Matthew Brown, behind the scenes, there is now a resurgence of um, suppression of the topic of UFOs, and kind of the shaming, like you don't talk about it's now a taboo subject again. That's worrisome. because that's what's kept us where we are for decades in the first
Yeah.
place. Uh, do you think that we can find our way out of it organically without an NDAA amendment in the next bill, or can we do it solely
Mm.
through the media?
Yeah, I think we can. I think that will take a lot longer. I think that we just have to kind of go around it and take a long arch, which would take, much longer than a direct route through the NDAA, of course. But
Hmm.
I am an optimist. So, for better or worse, I don't know at this point.
Yeah, you
But
can't do it. You
yeah,
can't do what you're doing if you're not an optimist. Like, there's just
no,
no
well,
way.
that's
Yeah,
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 very true, very true. So yeah, I think there are still different routes that we can take.
yeah.
It's just keeping the momentum and not giving up or being too disheartened when things like when the NDAA failed. It was
Hmm.
disheartening, but then you have to pick yourself straight back up and say, "You look, we're going to get knocks, we're going to get
Yeah.
pushback. There's always been
Mhm.
pushback behind the scenes. We've done it before. We've got around it, and we'll get through each brick wall as we come to it."
Yeah, and scientists will come along as well. Science is a funny thing, and I love Neil deGrasse Tyson, but also he sometimes really irks me. With his ultra. I wouldn't even call it ultra skepticism. It's just he doesn't seem to really take the time to study the subject. It's kind of surface level. Um, kind of like Fitzpatrick, when I think, was it Mick West was interviewing him, and he like clearly was lacking, didn't understand the Tic Tac. I think it was the Tic Tac video they were talking about, and it was like he was clearly kind of ignorant. It's like, whoa, how does that happen?
Yeah,
But for instance, with the controversy over these redshift lights in the distant galaxies that they've recently discovered, which either the Big Bang is wrong and it's much 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 older than we thought, or those galaxies were formed, much earlier, like 200 million years or something like that. Uh, and so scientists are now like kind of slugging it out, and trying to figure out like what happened and why is this happening. And but fundamentally, the Big Bang theory can, still holds together. But
sure.
that's the way science is. And I am encouraged by, like we mentioned earlier, these other scientists coming forward and kind of pushing the subject, because eventually, if you get enough good minds, chipping away at it, we will get to the center of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd rather have scientists arguing about UAP than not looking at it at all, because
Exactly. Yeah.
they'll push each other to keep going and keep studying
Hmm.
it and want to prove the other wrong, let's say. So it's great that we have people starting to switch onto it in academia and in the scientific community. And then we've got great think tanks like the Soul Foundation, full of some
Hmm.
wonderful people within,
Oh yeah.
ex-government, this and that, and science mixed in there as well. We're getting some
Yeah.
serious papers written, some op-eds, and that, again, really great minds. And this, it does seem to be progressing. We get more and more people coming forward each year, with interest. Is it enough? No, it's definitely not enough, but it's encouraging. And speaking with people like Avi, he speaks to people every day about this subject, and
Hmm.
it's surprising how many people of such high regard are genuinely curious about the subject. So yeah, I'm encouraged by it all.
The UFO appearance formation underwater, off the coast of California. What's your take on that? Was that just a image processing problem from a Google satellite, or because it was there and then it kind of just seemed to disappear? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any grand conspiracy behind it, to be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah, if I don't have much evidence for anything, well, maybe I should rephrase that, because we don't have much evidence for anything at all in this subject, to be
Well,
fair. But
yeah.
it's
We
very
we have
easy to
some.
latch onto, or to think of it as a conspiracy. It's
Mhm.
too easy to do that, and so I pull myself back from doing that. And I think coincidence comes first for me. It's just
Mhm.
something that happens, you know. Yeah.
Do you go out and spend time just looking at the stars and waiting to see something, or
I don't, because unfortunately here in England, 9 times out of 10, or 99 times out of 100, the skies are just overcast, very much overcast.
yeah, yeah.
I do love looking at the sky. And whenever I'm abroad, anywhere that the skies are nice, I'm mesmerized by it. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
it. I love the idea of it. But yeah, it's very disheartening every day when I look out my window and it's just gray skies and cloudy.
yeah. I'm laughing because we're currently experiencing your weather, It's just like,
Oh, really?
yeah. Oh my God, this happened last year too. Just rainy days after rainy days and overcast, and it's like, oh my gosh, what happened to spring?
Right.
We might get like a couple of days or one day here or there where there's sun, but oh my God, it's just constant. Um, yeah, and we lived in New York City for a while, and that was one thing I really missed, was being able to just like step outside and look at
Mm.
the stars at night. If there was some kind of the Perseids, or some kind of
Yeah.
meteoric event, I'd step outside, and it's just pointless. Like, you can't, with the pollution and the overcast of the city, like, it was just impossible. So we love it now in the Hudson Valley, where we can actually get some air, get some clear skies.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Um, you know, are you um are you a spiritual person in any way?
Um, I'm not directly spiritual. I think my years in this subject have really opened me up to that kind of side of things, but it's not
Hmm.
something I've really delved into practicing or even researching. But
Yeah.
making friends and so many connections in the community with people that are kind of more on that side of things, it's
Hmm.
it's allowed me to kind of say, okay, well, this is a part and parcel of this subject. I come from that very nuts and bolts background, and I
Sure.
realized that just by staying in the nuts and bolts only, I've got tunnel vision. I'm not opening myself up to the peripherals where there's more information and things to kind of add
Right.
to this whole puzzle. So, yeah, I find it just as fascinating, and I'll have interviews with people that are more on that kind of side of things. So, yeah, definitely open to it.
Yeah, I do find it interesting, as a agnostic slash atheist, that I'm totally open to the whole spiritual side of things, because there's some things like panpsychism and all these other philosophies that where it's like, well, maybe the fundamental nature of reality is consciousness, or what have you, and so that all these high strangeness things aren't really as strange as we think they are. We just don't understand the fundamentals. And I ask you that because I do think that there seems to be something connected to consciousness with a lot of these UAP experiences. Uh, if you could have the opportunity to experience something like a Jake Barber, or a Betty Hill, like, would you be willing to do that, or is that something that frightens you?
The unknown frightens me a little bit. It's the same
Mhm.
when people ask me if I've tried CE5. I answer no,
Mm.
I haven't, because because we don't fully understand what's behind UFOs and
Sure.
UAP.
Yeah.
I think calling something in that you don't know has just as much potential to be as dangerous as it is wonderful.
Yeah.
So I always err on the side of caution, because I don't know. I think it would be wrong of me to do that. I just feel like it's not right for me at this time. But
Mhm.
it's like I do want that sighting though. I want to see
Yeah.
something spectacular. I want to feel something spectacular. When you think about the Jake Barber story where he sees this amazing object
Yeah.
that he's
Yeah.
picked up, but he has that almost spiritual feeling, that overwhelming feeling of like the feminine love kind of feeling. I think he kind of almost described it as, and it didn't sound bad necessarily. But then it could just as easily be something almost identical, but that you do feel fear at the same time as well.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Why do you think
tough
you feel
one.
that? What do you think that comes from? That desire to kind of have that experience, to see a UFO or what have you?
It's just that because I'm such an advocate for disclosure, and I feel that
Mhm.
a lot of people that are experiencers or witnesses to these things, they've already had their disclosure. They don't need
Right.
that full capital D disclosure, because for them, they've seen it. They know it's real.
Yeah.
Like, I believe it's real, but do I know it's real? Not 100%. I need that object in the sky I've just seen has just given, I want that. It won't necessarily change what I do, but it'll just give me that boost, something. It'll give me something I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's missing necessarily from me, but it's that
Mhm.
curiosity, just need it fulfilling.
Because it's like you're forever on the edge, right? It's
So close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there's enough evidence to make you think that it seems like there very could well be
Mm,
extraterrestrials or NHI, what have you,
yeah.
visiting here and doing things. but you can't say 100%.
No,
Like you just can't get there. So I understand that desire, because even the UFO that I saw, I mean, it was just essentially a light in the sky when I was a kid, right? Um, I didn't see the metallic side. I didn't, see, a glowing egg, um,
sure.
right?
Would
Oh,
be nice.
actually, I want to ask you about that too.
Mhm.
I have some suspicions about the Jake Barber video, not the Jake Barber video, but the video that um, Ross Coulthart included in his original News Nation interview with Jake. It was kind of
Mhm.
misleading. It was misleading
Sure,
because that wasn't the video that Jake had actually taken.
sure.
And I've recently kind of rewatched that video again. And initially, I was on the side of like, yeah, it looks like it's a heavy object. But I just kept thinking about it. I was like, I don't know. That could have been a balloon. Like if it was. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be.
Mhm,
Yeah, and again, it comes down to I don't spend that much time worrying too much about individual videos. I still try and like
mhm.
pull myself away from that and look at the bigger picture. Look at Jake's testimony and story. Yeah, it didn't help the way that that was put out at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Certainly didn't. But I quickly moved into listening to Jake and being very excited about the work that Skywatcher and the team are doing.
yeah.
I think there should be more to come from that. That hopefully,
Yeah, it is really fascinating, and I know Gary Nolan had some insight into that.
yeah,
He got to witness some of it,
yeah,
so hopefully that drives more study. Because if they have figured something out, that's interesting. But back to your point, even if it's not like a CE5 where you're putting out your thing, if they're using some kind of technology
mm,
to call these things down, is that not dangerous as well? Because even if they're not intentionally here to harm us. We hear about all these accidental UFO encounters, John Burroughs being kind of radiated,
yeah,
Betty Cash. I mean, like people have been really harmed because of these things, even if it's not intentional. So I'm with you on that. I definitely have some serious concerns about calling down UFOs.
yeah. It's scary when you think about those cases. You know, the Cash Landrum case.
Hmm.
You know, that was. I would not want to be there at that time as much as I'd want to see that amazing shaped object and
Yeah, yeah.
everything that went on there. But yeah, yeah, it's funny. But you know, the Skywatch team, they've put themselves in this position. They're willing to do the work. It's great that they've got
Hmm.
the technology side of things, and then they're bringing in the psionics team as well. So you kind of get both sides of the of something we've not seen in one complete package before. So that excites me. I like the way that they've presented things. They've given us these really glossy, highly well produced YouTube videos, which kind of feeds the people online that say we want more, we want more. They
Hmm.
get to watch these well crafted videos, but then the studies are being done as well.
Yeah,
They're being as transparent as they can be. You know, it'd be nice to hear a bit more about the proprietary technology that they're using, the dog whistle, for example. But
yeah, yeah.
you know, I understand they've got to maybe hold some things back for now. We'll see how things look 6, 12, 18 months down the line.
Sure, yeah, and if they include more, sensors, having more of a
Sure. Mm,
multi-platform sensor system that can corroborate, then that would really be helpful too.
yeah.
Uh, Vinny, if you can leave us with any thought, like what would it be?
Um, I'd say to people, just keep having the conversation. People watching as well, if they feel like they want to do more, they can. I think, you know, we need more voices, whether it be just more interactions online. I like it when people reach out to me all the time and I try and speak to as many people as I can. I think it just, you know, I don't want people to feel so separated from others in the community. I think
Yeah,
I try not to use the cliche, we're all in this together, we should all work together, because I know it's not that straightforward, but I think we are strength in numbers.
yeah,
So I will use the contact your representatives. I think that's still vital
for sure.
to
Yeah.
that sort of angle of disclosure, that course of action that we need to continue on. But I think
Mhm.
as well, just be curious, be open-minded, and be kind. You know, I think
Yeah,
that's all.
even to the debunkers. Be
Yeah,
kind.
why not? You know,
Yeah,
kill
yeah,
them with kindness.
that's right. All right, cool, Vinny. I love that, and actually it reminded me. It's about that time that I email my representatives again. Like you said, like every
Yeah,
once in a while, just send out an email
yeah,
and just remind them, like, hey, this matters to us.
Yeah.
It's important. It doesn't take much, just a
It
sentence.
doesn't.
Yep.
You know, there are so many members of the house that haven't kind of come on board yet. We need them all on
True.
board. The more the merrier.
Yep. Exactly. All right, Vinny, thank you so much for being on Coffee and UFOs. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. Really, really enjoyed that.
Okay, and everyone, please go to Vinny's YouTube channel at Real Disclosure Team for just numerous great interviews. If you are a fan of Coffee and UFOs, please subscribe, comment down below, like, and click the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming or unexpected videos. And if you listen to the podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, please give it a good rate and review, because all that really helps grow the podcast and the platform. As a special thanks to Margie K and Race Hobbs, just going to send you guys my love. I really appreciate all the support you give me here at Coffee and UFOs on your Onyx network. And to the rest of you out there, thank you for your ongoing support over these years. I really appreciate it. In the meantime, peace and love, and live in the mystery.